official Canton Coders meetup, and I will turn on my video. So I'm Joel. I'm the guy behind Twitter. This is Gugu.
Hello, everyone.
Gugu, where do you
live? Next door.
Literally.
Literally.
Are you a coder?
Sometimes.
Sometimes?
Yeah, but
well,
I like to be 24 hours.
24 hours. Well, cheers.
Cheers to you.
This is the first official meetup. Weirdest way to ever have one. So Gugu and I talked about having Canton Coders for years. How many?
At least 3 years, at least.
Yeah. We would drive to Southfield, Ann Arbor, Detroit to great meetups, but how did your wife feel about that?
Oh, it's a long story.
So we decided
this is much better. Let's just put it this way.
We decided we should totally have a meetup in Canton, and we decided this year we wanted to start it. We had a great first speaker named Bob Allen, and then the world happened. So the idea behind Canton Coders is we're really, really lean, which means if we have another one, that's because more than Gugu and I show up. Gugu and I can talk about code all day in my backyard, but we can't get cool guests like Bryan and Dana to come speak to us about interesting things. I just don't think it would happen. So before we get started, just want to say Canton Coders is about the individual coder. It's not about our company, our family, who we work for, our clients, anything. So anything we say on here represents our own personal views, which could be wrong. They're subject to evolution, but they don't represent anything other than our personal opinions. So that's our standard disclaimer. Tonight is all about learning about continuous integration and delivery from Dana and Bryan. And the only way this is going to happen is to drop. Oh, I was reading the Twitch chat. That's right. We're going to get distracted by the Twitch chat tonight. Drop questions in Twitch, Twitter, Slack. If you have my cell phone number, text me. Text me. If you have Dana and Bryan's cell phone number, text them, because I know there's some people from outside of Canton coming, which is awesome. And
lovely.
Yeah, anything else before we get going?
Let's get it going.
All right.
Let's get it going. So
on the line and in their basement, we have two DevOps experts. So if I have a question, I go to these two people. So they are the senseis. They are the brilliant mind behind here. And tonight, open floor. But the one question I have is, which one of you fixed Git flow?
I fixed Git flow.
And your audio is a little faint, so we're gonna figure out this production as we go.
Okay. So I fixed Git flow. Git flow has been the bane of my existence since we started working on continuous delivery, and Dana is trying to adjust our audio as we go. And I finally got so irritated that I asked the person who posted the first blog about Git flow to please fix it to show that what it does work for, because it doesn't work for CD. And he did.
He fixed it. So you are the slayer of Git flow?
Well, I haven't slayed it yet, but at least I have a resource to point to.
That's awesome.
Well, that's interesting, because I use it every day. How exactly did you slay it? What did you say to him?
So he updated his blog to say that Git flow has some particular use cases, and one of those is not continuous delivery. If you're doing continuous delivery, you should use, well, he said GitHub flow, which is trunk-based development.
Interesting.
Yeah. So if you're trying to do CD and you're trying to use Git flow, you'll stop on like bi-weekly delivery.
Interesting. So you slayed GitHub. Thank you. If you are a fan of GitHub,
Git flow.
Git flow.
Yeah.
We accept everyone here at Canton Coders. We do not talk about things that infuriate people. So if you want to talk about like the inferior things of Git flow, or can we talk about that? we'll figure it out as we go. But the whole reason we had you to talk tonight was not about Git flow.
Yeah.
It was, what you wanted to talk about was what people get wrong with continuous integration and continuous delivery. And on the board behind you, you wrote some very infuriating remarks.
Yes, CI is not Jenkins.
So explain to our audience who is anything from, if you see those names, anything from XP leading thinkers to people that just took up coding.
Yeah.
What are people doing wrong these days?
Well, so I'm not going to go directly to CI yet because I have a list here that's kind of in my personal pain sequence.
In regards to the Jenkins is not CI. I personally have a good amount of experience with this from not even my current employer. And you know, the idea behind that is that, yes, Jenkins is a tool that enables you to build a pipeline through which you can build software, publish it to a repository, and it enables that capability. But if you start out saying that we're going to do CI, so all we need is a pipeline, there's no way that you can use a pipeline that's built for CI without retraining how you code using evolutionary coding, evolutionary change, and the habit of just daily, quickly running changes as a team so that everybody's not on their own page trying to merge them together. It just doesn't work that way. And so that's inspired by the thought that, you know, all we need are pipelines. We can talk about how cool all this other stuff is later, but first we got to get pipelines in, and pipelines are the key. And pipelines are a useful tool, but there's a lot more that has to happen on the front end.
You know, the analogy I use is that, you know, I do some woodworking at home, and if I buy a top-of-the-line table saw, it doesn't mean I'm now a craftsman of fine furniture. It means I can cut my hand off really fast. And the pipeline will give you if you don't have the process to support it.
So what you're telling me is the tool doesn't make the practice?
Actually, the tool can really damage you if you don't have the practice.
Huh. Ah.
But so let's go through I've got a list here, and I'd love to see if anybody else has any other things that they've seen as misconceptions. But one of the things that I've heard people say in my career when I talk about continuous delivery is that we don't need to do continuous delivery because our customers don't want change that quickly. And you know, and I think they're looking at it from the wrong point of view, right? Now, you know, I've been a developer for longer than I'd like to admit. And I've carried a pager back when it was actually a pager, right? When I literally had a Motorola device hanging on my hip.
Yep.
At all times, waiting to go off 24/7. And I tell people that I optimize for sleep. That's what I do. I'm a developer. I optimize for sleep. And continuous delivery allows me to optimize for sleep. It's not about delivering features. Your customers may not need features that quickly, though they probably do. But what they do need is they need you to fix production that quickly. And that's what CD is about. It's about reducing that mean time to repair. And you practice reducing your mean time to repair by shipping features every single day to validate that you can fix production at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're tired, you came back from the bar, whatever. You know, your brain is not at peak efficiency at 3 a.m. when stuff is breaking. Exactly. So you need CD to protect you, right? CD is about optimizing for sleep. So, and that's the first one. If you're not putting together a continuous delivery process, that means that when you're fixing production, it's already a dumpster fire, right? And you're trying to bash together some sort of fix in the least safe way possible while it's already a dumpster fire. Is that good for you or the business?
And the other side of that is that by practicing continuous integration and moving toward continuous delivery, you're driving down your work size into the smallest possible increments that can be independently deployed. So when you do have a problem, you know almost exactly where it came from because the change is so small and so frequent that you don't have to look back through a month's worth of coding with 10 different developers. Where did this come from? Who knows something about it? You're talking about each individual hitting master, hitting test, and with continuous deployment, even hitting production every day, which gives you a really good idea of where any issues might have come from.
I think it sounds great for bugs and such, but how about for features? Are features always deliver them that quick?
That is our audience, so we are doing this live. The intent of our meetup is to be face-to-face. We don't want to get good at this. And we got lots of questions coming in, so that's great. Keep them coming in. We'll start pulling them into the conversation.
Our dogs tend to be opinionated on the subject. They hear us talk about it all the time.
I'm sorry, before our child interrupted, what was the question?
So, what was your question?
Yeah, great for bugs. How about features? Are features that small that they can be delivered so constantly?
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry, the dog.
Your question's not good.
Right.
Let me switch
There's a
up.
lot of this going on today. So, that comes down to engineering your change. I mean, we're professional software engineers. We don't just kind of code and code and code and code and deliver. We design every single change to be deliverable at the end of the day, or more frequently, right? And this is where people don't understand CI. CI means, this is critical, is that we are coding in such a way that we can multiple times a day put releasable code that's tested on master and keep master deployable at all times.
When you say the word master, what do you mean?
The trunk, the central part of version control, right? I've had people argue with me that we're doing CI because I'm pulling all the time from master on my long-lived feature branch. Well, so is everybody else. And nothing's actually integrating. You're just pulling. I'm getting updates from something that's never changing, right? CI is going the other direction, putting it up there to make sure it's working with everything else and doing it in tiny, tiny bits.
So are you saying so continuous means continuous?
Yeah, so it's almost as if you want to do it all the time. It's strange, I know.
Hey,
so when do I get to do my stress testing, my endurance testing, and all
Yeah.
that regression testing in 24 hours?
Well, of course, that comes downstream CI. That's where the rest of the CD pipeline comes, right? And the other thing that we talk to teams about all the time, anytime we're talking to anybody about CD, is your job isn't really to deliver features. Your job is to test the pipeline with features. You're shipping tiny features all the time to find out where your pipeline is broken and then fixing the pipeline so it won't do that again, right? And if you find a defect penetrated production, what's the cheapest fix we can make in the pipeline so that we can not break that way again and harden the pipeline all the time. And that's really the product you're shipping. You're shipping the pipeline as the product. And you're using the features to test it.
And on the flip side of that, when you have a whole team focused on small incremental non-breaking changes constantly hitting master as you're developing a feature, it might not be able to be turned on in one day, but you're putting the code out there, you're making sure that the code that is there is not breaking any other code, but it's also forcing, again, the smaller batches, which as each person on the team may merge their code into that master pipeline, you're getting super rapid feedback about the design of the change and how you're going about it. I've personally been in situations where it's made it extremely visible that maybe the first design approach wasn't quite the best and we wanted to go ahead and tweak it. And we found that in 2 days, not in 3 weeks after everyone was done with their parts and started to try to merge it back together.
And real quick, there's, we're going to go through some of these questions, but Karen just posted about how the value of reducing our iterations, reducing cycle time will pay for itself. And that's absolutely true. The smaller the batch is, the higher the quality is going to be in each batch. It's easier to inspect, right? It's easier to execute a quality process against tiny batches. And as you shrink batch size, you start bubbling up all the things that are causing you pain, all of the waste in your process, all the extra overhead you've got. You start removing those to minimum viable process. And it becomes much less expensive to deliver.
Continuous delivery is really painful when you have a lot of process around merging, deploying, and that whole process. So, that's another thing. Jez Humble's, years old quote of "if it hurts, do it more often."
Yeah.
And man, it hurts when you got to go in there.
Is
And
that years old now? Okay, we must be getting.
It's like a decade
it's
now.
over a decade
I know,
old
the Continuous
now.
Delivery book was published in 2009.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's old. It's an old concept, but we're still doing it, or still not doing it enough to get rid of those pain points.
You guys mind taking some questions from the field here?
Please.
Great.
I got 2 questions here that are about the same as, okay, continuous integration delivery, great. How do I get management to actually give me time to do it and get me the money and the tools to do it?
Well, it's funny. We kind of started in guerrilla warfare originally, where we just kind of did it and then showed them.
Red shirts.
Yeah. That's.
What is the red shirt, by the way?
If you read the Unicorn Project, that's kind of a tribute to people in the grassroots who are like, "This is crap. We got to make it better," and they just kind of do, like in their spare time on the side, and then say, "Hey, look how better this is." And they're like, "Oh yeah," and then they take credit for the idea, but that's fine because we get to sleep better.
Can I get a show of hands of people that had to do that in a corporate environment the first time? Google, is your hand not up? It must be management.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, but I mean, I'm seeing this, how do you convince product owners to allow time for it? And it comes down to how expensive is it for us to not? If we can make tiny improvements, you don't say, hey, we're going to go and develop an entire CI/CD flow. We say, hey, we have this pain point where we're having to do all this manual process, and we just spend a little bit of time on automating this, then we'll have more time. And as you run those tiny experiments and measure first, always measure what your current flow is, how much time it takes, and the reduction in time. If you skip the measurement, and I've done this, I've skipped the measurement originally, and we couldn't show data, and that hurt us, right? Keep track of the data. But tiny improvements, and that frees up more time for more tiny improvements. And eventually this snowballs into good.
So what I just heard was, you probably want to call yourself an expert, but although you may or may not be in the Unicorn Project, there's been a lot of forwards written by you guys.
We're studying all the time. We are not experts.
Yeah, but so you've literally made mistakes in your career?
No, I've never made a mistake.
Ever? A real quick question before we move on. This is a completely different.
No, I mean, ask me what mistakes I made today.
Well, this is only going to 7:30 tonight, so stay later.
Yeah.
But I would just want to add to that, because it seems like that question was also focused on like buying into having all the tools, and really the process and the concepts that developers need to use in order to do CI are just as important. If you're executing CI into a branch, okay, right? So you're executing something that could be going to master if you were, say, allowed to do that. Or maybe you get it there and you start going to master. you're learning the skills to get it there. You're adding the tests slowly so that you can get it there and get a comfort level with it. And it doesn't require Jenkins or something at first, right? You can start by simply showing the value of automation in small everyday things. Say, let's go ahead and make or build, you know, every time we push to master, let's go ahead and write a script that builds it for us.
Yeah, you can
And
use
let's manually
Bash on
run
cron.
that script.
Yeah.
Manually run that script, or have a cron, even better, you know, schedule it through something. You know, you could use a built-in operating system task scheduler if you have nothing. I mean, a run deck, anything, without having to invest a lot in having big formalized pipelines to show the kind of value that just simple automation can give.
So speaking of skills, if there's another question about skills, about what are the skills that developers need for evolutionary design?
Well, actually, I want to touch on the script kiddie thing real quick, because it's one of my favorite things, is that, you know, I'm a professional software engineer. I deliver working solutions, and I know they're working because I fully test what I do. A script kiddie is somebody who throws code over the wall for somebody else to do that for them. So there you go, Chris. That's what a script kiddie is.
I don't. Yeah, if I got the right code these days, I'd be thrilled. I'm turning more to you, Gugu. Look at how, by the way, raise your hand.
I didn't see what was the question you saw? 'Cause I didn't see the question.
What are the skills you need for evolutionary, I think it was evolutionary coding or evolutionary design?
So evolutionary coding, you need to always be thinking, you know, the change that I'm making now, how can I apply this change in a way that it's backwards compatible? Now, one of the examples I tell people, because they keep challenging me on this, is that I have done there was a project I worked on once where we had a massive switch case statement that was determining what labels would be printed in different situations at a distribution center. And the problem was that the requirements we originally had said that all we needed was a case statement to get it done. But the requirements were wrong. And to completely fulfill the requirements, there was no possible way a case statement would get it done. I had to put a rules engine in place. And it took me a couple weeks to fully vet out this rules engine and fully test it. But I was delivering every single day to production while I was doing this rules engine change, me personally, right? But the last change I did was to swap out the case statement for the rules engine, right? It was just, it wasn't even branched by abstraction. It was just that the only thing consuming the rules engine was the tests. And once I had it fully tested, was confident, all I had to do was switch out from this case statement to the rules engine. And then if it broke, all I had to do was switch it back. And it's just that thought process of how do I make, you know, what is my plan for the change? You can't just code, you have to plan how you will code. It's just like any other engineering discipline. If I'm doing machining, if I'm doing woodworking, I have to plan the sequence of steps that will happen to go from raw material to done.
I think one aha moment I've had around that also is to be able to like kind of step back and think about it, I'm going to say backwards from a traditional coding concept, because everyone, if you're looking at like a vertical slice change, you're thinking, okay, well, I need to build this screen, I need to build these fields, then I need to put some functionality behind it, and, you know, maybe make a database change. And when you're used to doing things in really big batches where it doesn't matter if you have a screen that doesn't work for a while, or a database that's not, you know, a service that doesn't work yet because the database isn't in place, and it doesn't matter because you're going to work on this branch for 3 weeks and then you're going to deploy it all at once. It's sometimes a very hard mind shift to think about it, you know, almost backwards. You know, what database changes do we need? How do we make those without affecting anything that's currently working today? What does our service need to have? What does that contract look like? And then the team can start working to where you build up that contract and say, this is what the API is going to have. You start building out your UI and don't necessarily turn things on until the API is actually behind it. That gives you the ability to mock against exactly what you're going to be getting from your service. The service then gets coded, right? And you build up until you get to this final project rather than starting with, this is what it needs to look like. So let's build this and then figure out how it works. Because I feel like that's in my experience, also having coded for longer than I wanted.
I guess
so it's a totally upside down mindset.
Difference between deployment and releasing a feature. So always deploy, but don't necessarily release.
You're very quiet.
Always
like a manager.
Not necessarily release.
Oh, yes, deploy but not release. But Mike on Slack, he asked a really important question. I mean, very, very important question. And let's say hypothetically I was having this conversation today. And so the question he's asking is around how do you convince people to do, trunk-based development, reduce their batch size, all that sort of thing. And so I lead a team that shows teams how to do this. And the thing that we focus on is the discipline of continuous integration. So we took a hardcore definition of CI straight from the book Continuous Delivery, which is every developer multiple times a day has backwards compatible, tested, releasable code on master. Okay? And I've created a working agreement around that concept. We don't go home with a broken build. All changes will be tested. All changes are releasable. And this is our development working agreement. When we first started piloting continuous delivery on the first team I worked on we were working on this, I literally printed that out and hung that up in the area. Now, we weren't good at it initially, right? But every single day it's, why can't we do this? And that's another misconception people have, is that CI is an aspirational goal. It's something eventually we'll get to CI. But CI is not a goal. CI is the lever to get to the goal. CI is the pressure to test correctly. CI is the pressure to break work down small. We as a team agree that we will do continuous integration and that we will use a real definition of CI and not some half-assed, we're pulling from master occasionally, and every week we integrate sort of thing. That's eventual integration. We focus on continuous integration. And then every single day as a team, it's like, hey, what can we do to get closer to this? And I tell you that the experience that I've had, and a teammate of mine and I spoke at DevOps Enterprise Summit in 2017 about the fact that pushing this way, once you get over the initial hump, it's a better way of working. The entire team feels better about it. And Mike, if you have a couple of teams that can demonstrate that they have more morale, they have a better quality, the other teams will want to copy them. And then the teams that don't, that's when you get top-down pressure for metrics improvement.
I think the other part of his question there is talking about a plethora of manual gates and approvals that have to be done. And that's something really, it takes looking at your, mapping out your process and keeping track of it. So if you get to the point of chunk-based development, it's like, well, what's the point? Because we got to wait anyway. You get to that point and nothing is done until it hits production. There's no real, you can be dev complete, but you're not delivering any value until you're in production. So by setting up your workflow and the visibility into your workflow of when that development is done and how long it sits waiting for these manual gates and approvals, and you can wrap metrics around that and start looking at it, then you can raise that up and say, why this is where our value stream, this is where our roadblocks are. Now, how can we start to change this so that we can actually get the value out as soon as or closer to the time that it's actually development complete?
Well, there's one other thing Mike touched on, which was lack the discipline of testing. And I've seen all sorts of operating models for development and support. And the operating model that fails is outsourcing support from development. That's grenade-driven development. That means that I get to code whatever crap I want to, throw it over the wall, and then they have to support it and fix it. If you want quality to improve, then the people writing the code feel the pain of poor quality. 100%. I was on a phone call with LexisNexis earlier this week, and that's the operating model they use. That if you've got an incident, they have frontline support, but you will be woken up and you will be on that support call because you need to feel the pain. You need to eat your own dog food to improve your quality. And that comes from convincing leadership of what drives quality, and it's not telling people to improve their test coverage.
And when each deployment that needs to be approved or needs to go through these gates is smaller and smaller and smaller, then there's less chance of risk. If you have all these manual gates in place, it's the security theater, quality theater. If you make a very small change and you've written one test that covers, the 80% of assurity that this new little tiny piece of code is going to work, then you can start to convince people to kind of get away from those manual gates, because people think of these gates and they think of all this approval that has to happen, because historically it's been huge changes that break things. So with a combination of convincing that we don't need as much manual check because it's only a small piece of code, and maybe we did manage to actually write this automated test for a change, then we get that through and people start to be able to shift that mindset. It's not, you're not doing 3 weeks worth of 10 people's code that you're trying to check. If a bad thing does get through, you know exactly where it came from, and the MTTR can be almost immediate.
Yes. So I'm gonna play the devil's advocate here a little bit.
You love doing that. That's like his professional role. He even dressed the part. Look at him.
All right. So I'm sure some of you have seen the meme of the integration test that failed. So I mean, it's great that you did the unit test and it works just for that unit.
Yeah.
About the integration part of it.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I learned early on when we started tackling continuous delivery was, like I said, I've been a developer for a long time, and for a large portion of that time I was working in languages that didn't actually have testing frameworks. So I had no idea how to test when we started on CD. We started on CD where I had to switch over to languages that were like modern and stuff. And I had to learn to test from scratch. And when I started thinking about the ability to go from my desktop to production completely automated with nobody going in and checking anything, I was suddenly terrified. Because holy crap, that means that testing is the first constraint, right? And so I had to dig into testing. And I tell you, anytime anybody asks me anything about this, I tell them I have 2 topics that are my top 2 favorite things I will bore you to death with. One is test design, right? Not just testing, not unit testing, test design for the pipeline, and metrics. How do we measure success? And I dig into testing constantly, and I'm always looking for better ways to design tests so that we can get feedback as rapidly as possible to the left, right? How do we design tests in such a way that any break is detected as early in the flow as possible? And how do we make tests as deterministic? And I've got all this training that I do on which tests should run in the pipeline, which tests should run parallel to the pipeline, that are verifying the tests running in the pipeline, and just layers and layers and layers of tests. So I actually have a Medium post that I talk about designing tests for continuous delivery, because it's design. And a lot of people look at tests as that afterthought, but if you're doing CD, testing is the thing that you do, and you're delivering code against the tests.
That's a good point.
So I want to take a pause real quick because I got to pitch out our next meetup. This is a good spot to pitch it up. April 15th. In person. Canton Public Library. No affiliation. Like, we're not affiliated. Like, I had to sign a paperwork. We're going to have Bob Allen. I think everybody in Michigan knows Bob Allen. We're going to do some hands-on mob programming. We'll figure out how to get that sanitary keyboard going. And we're going to do some behavioral driven development. But that's the end of my pitch. Look at our website. Follow our. I will spam you to death on our Twitter. You will know about this. But that's the end of my pitch.
And this is an excellent segue into one of my other pain points, what people get wrong about continuous delivery. Because when we started focusing on continuous delivery, and I started focusing on testing, I went around to the different teams. I took a survey. I said, hey, we need to be able to do test-driven development, right? We need to be able to test before, not necessarily test-driven development, but developer-driven testing. You have to write the test before you push code, right? And they couldn't. And I said, why? Why can't we? And the constant answer I got was, we don't have clear requirements.
Yes.
And so I started digging around trying to figure out what that is, because they're doing exploratory coding. You can't test first and do exploratory coding.
What is exploratory coding for some of the new developers out there?
So exploratory coding is, I kind of have a vague idea of what you want, and so I'm going to throw code at it and try to figure out if that's what you really asked for.
So is that different than guessing?
No. And so
Really hard to write detailed acceptance criteria.
And so after a bunch of research, and this was really after a bunch of research, I stumbled on behavior-driven development, right? And then about 6 months later, found out that all the management had been trained on that. There was a one-page thing in the Agile training they got on behavior-driven development. I'm like, it would have been nice if you clued me in. But
wait, Gugu, why didn't you tell us?
I don't think it was that important.
But fortunately, I stumbled on Liz Keogh, who is a trainer on BDD, and absorbed everything she did. And I started sharing that around the company, to other people. Hey, this BDD thing, clear requirements. Now we know how to go forward. But the thing that I figured out, the point for what people get wrong is all that Agile crap, right? All that Agile crap. They inflicted all this Agile crap on us, right? And then said, go deliver. But it didn't make any sense at all until we started executing CD. And then suddenly I had to go and relearn all that Agile crap because they didn't teach us right in the first place, right? And say, oh, okay, if I'm going to do CD, I should probably figure out this Agile crap, because all that stuff is key to getting it done correctly. How do I manage workflow as a team? How do I break things down tiny, tiny, tiny? How do I scientifically split stories, right? How do I get things, how do I get clear requirements with BDD? How do I get the buy-off that this is the definition of done, and we're not going to change the definition of done in the midstream. We're not going to gold plate. This thing will ship this like this, and if we miss something, we'll ship another thing, right? And those are key skills that if people don't understand that, they can't do CD.
So what you're telling me is decomposition of work is probably the starting point of CI/CD?
It's probably your first concern. Yeah.
Whoa. This is all about coding. We promised to talk about coding.
Yeah. So coding is the dessert. Coding is fun. Coding is what I do to relax. Okay? Coding is not the work. Understanding what to code is the work.
That blew my mind.
So what's your third one? I think we got two. I know we were scheduled to go to 7:30, but be honest, everything's closed around here. I got a 6-pack. We're good.
I mean, I'm good. I'm good for a while.
We got 30 viewers online, so that's not dropping, or my wife is now signed in on every device in the house. So what's your third thing? Because you sent me, let's be honest, we're not completely amateur. He sent me some talking points. So did Dana. What's your third thing that people get wrong?
Well, I have more than 3 here.
I think we've talked about a good amount of them.
Well,
all around them.
So I mean, back, you know, there's a few common things that we see on teams all the time that are just incredibly common. They're so common they're boring. In fact, on my team, we're working to provide information to people on those things in a way that they can understand, they can self-discover them, because we're tired of answering that question. We want some more interesting questions because we're developers and we hate repeating ourselves. And that's the rest of that Agile crowd, right? Is working as a team. You know, it's incredibly common for people, especially managers who think they get it, to say, so what Agile is we're going to have story points, and I'm going to assign you this, you know, we've got 5 developers on the team or 10 developers. Here's your stories for the sprint. Here's your stories for the sprint, right? And then judge you on whether or not you got your set of stories done. So what you've done is, if you've got a 10-person team, how many teams is that, Sudie? We got a 10-person team and everybody has their own backlog. How many teams is that?
10 teams.
10 teams.
I thought it was 10 to the power of 10.
You got 10 teams of 1, and the business doesn't care how you manage workflow, but they do care if one of them goes out with coronavirus, or, I mean, that's outlandish, I know, but they do care if one of them gets sick for a while, and then that backlog doesn't get delivered. And nobody's going to deliver it because it's not on their list, it's not on their radar.
And they're not the experts in it.
Yeah, they're not the experts on it. We want to make sure that the expert on that is the one person working on that thing. Yeah. You go and read anything about Sam Walton. And my boss said this is a quote from my boss, said if Sam Walton was alive today and in Silicon Valley, he would own Silicon Valley. He was DevOps in the 60s. Okay, because what you're talking, he's got a quote that individuals don't win in business, teams do. Individuals don't ship value, teams do. Teams are responsible for shipping, not the individuals on the team. Individuals can have life issues. Some individuals might be stronger or weaker. And it's a team's job to elevate everybody and to ship value. The team is responsible. If somebody in the team fails, the team fails, right? And so that teamwork is key. And you can't do CI without teamwork. You can't break down work without teamwork. And you can't deliver as a team if the team has assigned tasks at the beginning of a sprint.
So I wanted to ask a question that's really relevant to the right now. Coronavirus. Okay, yeah. I'm not trying to be political. What do you do? Because I know some people, I mean, there's a guy named James saying, "This is my life." Like, I think you're triggering him with your patterns. How does a team that's working well handle coronavirus versus the individual group of 10? What do you see the difference? Are you experiencing that? Have you heard any stories?
Like somebody on the team has coronavirus?
Or like someone's sick or gone for 2 weeks, or you can't work together because you're sitting at home with blankets hanging on the wall.
I mean, so I have not personally seen any kind of like impact from coronavirus per se, but I did a talk on this whole subject at DevOps Days Dallas last year that was basically called Do the Math, because that's what I used to always tell my manager when he wanted to say, okay, well, this project is going to be so-and-so's baby, and this person's going to work on this, and this person's going to work on that, you know, and they're in charge of those. You know, it's like, okay, wait a minute. If we're doing all these things at once, we can't do that. Like, do the math. If you have 6 people working on 6 things, and they're all going to take like 3 months to finish up totally, right? I'm not talking like a feature, but like something long running. And, you know, whether you have it broken down into features or not. So a product, so someone might be able to deliver a feature in a sprint by themselves if they don't get sick, if they don't leave the company, if they don't, you know, if they're there. And by having them only working on that, then you lose the knowledge. So personal experience. You know, we had someone leave the team. That product still hasn't been stood up to this day. And it was a couple of years ago. Because it was, you know, his experience, his thing, his, you know, this was what he was going to produce. And then he was gone. And it's like, you know, there's so many other things going on. And, you know, it's a real thing. You know, if you're going to have different people working on different things, there are so many ways for that to go on. If the team's focused on a single priority, then they can work together and make sure that it happens. And even if you have 3 people out, because, you know, coronavirus is a big thing, if 3 people were out, you know, the other people on the team would still know exactly what's going on. They would have been part of the breakdown for it. The cards, you know, everything that were, the work efforts would be completely broken down to the level that anybody could pick them up. And you don't lose that productivity, because even if someone's capable of picking up someone else's project, which shouldn't be a thing, that's going to take a lot of time. But if the whole team's aware of everything that's going on, then you get true team ownership of it. And you get that productivity that's very hard to interrupt.
So there's, you know, I was looking at kind of interaction with Karen a little bit on Slack, and I want to talk about a couple things. One of those is that, you know, we talked about the team delivering value, okay? And anything the team is doing that's not in production is potential waste. You don't know it's valuable at all until it's in production and being validated as valuable. And the closer something is to production, the closer it is to being valuable. And one of the things, you know, we talk to teams about, for example, is code review. You know, how long does it take after you submit a code review before someone picks it up? And they've got all sorts of interesting, just really interesting processes for code review. But what I tell them is that if you have submitted a pull request for code review, the highest priority task you have is to see if there's any code reviews out there that you can do. Because if it's ready for code review, it is closer to production, closer to being valuable. If there's no code reviews that you can process, your next highest priority task is to see if anybody's struggling. Because they are working on something, that they have something in progress. And if they're struggling, scratching their head, you know, can maybe just having a conversation with them, doing some rubber ducky testing, might push them over the edge and get them closer to submitting a code review. And if you can't find anybody to help, you know what? Pick up another task. Start coding, right? But your job is to help the team push something to done. Your job is not to bring more stuff into work unless you can't help anybody else get done.
So Bryan, we have a bunch of personalities out there. One of them I'm going to pick on Google a little more because he looks like a manager tonight. Is it okay for Google to assign that behavior to his team?
No.
Do they have to want to do it themselves, or how does he help his team do that?
Yeah, because I keep telling them.
So what you do is you start, number one, you sell really hard. The continuous delivery is a better way of life. So my team, and Walmart's tagline is save money, live better. Okay? And we believe that. That's a cultural thing that we deeply believe, right? That we're going to save you money so that you can live better. Okay? Now, my team's tagline is deploy more, sleep better. Okay? Because we know it's true. We are not theoreticians. We are senior developers. We've lived this. We've done CD. I've done software development poorly for decades. And I can tell you the difference between good and bad. And I can tell you the difference in my sleep schedule. Okay? And so it's deploy more, sleep better. And also, by the way, it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool to be able to hit the deploy button versus going to cab. Okay, I mean, it's super cool. All right, there's a guy I work with who literally built a box using an easy button, and you can see a presentation I did on this at DevOps Enterprise Summit, and he hits a literal button and it deploys to production. All right, and this is not some edge thing. It's a key tool that a large portion of the company depends on. So it's critical, right? And so you sell. And then you establish metrics goals and say, hey, look, what we're trying to do is this. And so let's see how we can improve our ability to go to mastery, right? And then you say, okay, then where's our pain? What is our daily pain? And you remove the pain.
I think also from a straight managerial standpoint, in my experience, a lot of managers say, everything's important, we got to get all this stuff done. If a manager is actually pushing down to the team that the highest priority was really the highest priority, and we have to get this one thing done first, then that would kind of force the team to work on it together, because the team has to buy into it. And if someone on the team thinks that they're going to get more kudos by going over here and doing something really innovative, or picking up this card that might be important, but it's not the number one priority, but they can kind of stand out that way. There's a lot of old cultural stuff in lots of different personalities within the team. But if a team was lucky enough, because I'm not sure I've really seen it in the wild, that a manager really wanted to focus on the number one priority, right? By getting the right priorities and saying, this is the priority, instead of these are the 5 priorities, go work them. I think that would be a really strong way to get the team on board. And that's
Okay.
coming from my experience of not having that. I think that'd be really important. Or not really seeing that. You don't see that because businesses are always, everything's important, everything has to be done. But if the management leadership levels really understood how important priorities are to getting teams to really focus on a priority, I think that would go a really long way.
Yeah.
I'm running a fictitious forklift flying manufacturer with jelly bean wheels.
Yeah.
And that system is all made with software. Right now, ask your question. How do you scale the test design across that product portfolio?
You make each team responsible for quality, right? And then you educate them on what's the word I'm looking for? The methodical approach to analyzing where failures are happening and move them closer to the developer. Okay, so if they're not responsible for quality, don't bother, right? Because test doesn't matter. The test will suck.
So what I'm hearing is you're going to have to change your organization to adopt some of these practices.
Yeah, so I wrote a blog post recently called DevOps Darwinism, and it talked about the teams today are working in the way that gives them the most success in the environment they're in. This is just straight up survival of the fittest, right? That you will behave in the way that gives you the most success in whatever environment you're in. If you want different outcomes, you need to change the environment so that teams will evolve into the teams that can better succeed in that environment. And that comes to, setting proper goals. And the goals aren't increase your velocity or make your code coverage better, because that's a vanity metrics, right? We need to be able to deploy more frequently with a higher success rate. We need to be able to recover rapidly, right? How frequently can we integrate code? Why can't we integrate code more frequently? Where are tests failing in the process? Are they failing, in an environment very close to the developer? Are they failing in end-to-end tests? Are they failing in production? How do we, and we don't blame teams for test failure. We say, okay, now how can we design the test to move that closer to the point of failure, or the point of error, which is the developer, right? Ultimately, how do we get to the point where individual developers know that they created that problem so that they can learn from it and not create that problem again? A failing test is an opportunity to educate someone, not a failure. And the more we educate people, the better we are at preventing those defects. And prevention is way cheaper than detection.
So it looks like, and I'm just, although the manager should be looking at the time and the clock, right? Us developers have to be responsible. It looks like we're approaching 7:30. We still have 27 viewers online. What do you guys think? Do you think we want to wrap it up?
I'm not empty.
So let's go out to the Twitch chat rooms, right?
Sure.
Because I know the four of us could actually bore you to death with all of this, but this is all about Bryan and Dana. Are there any other questions you have? And also, there are some really good experts in our chat room. I invite you to Google names you see, because it's really interesting what an online community looks like during a pandemic and who shows up. So there's some really good opinions out there. Are there any questions? What do you guys want to keep doing over there in the red shirts?
Well, so Bob Allen asked something that's, I said that testing and metrics are my number 1 and 2 things. And Bob talked about metrics. And keeping metrics visible is key, but also keeping metrics visible in a way that makes you want to change things. So Troy McGinnis is really good at this. If you go look at Troy McGinnis' stuff, he talks about building graphs that make you want to react to them. So you're not just displaying data, you're causing an emotional impact to the data. And that's something that I focus on as well is, how do I display your delivery metrics in a way that gives you an emotion, right? Either makes you feel proud or makes you feel afraid, or just, it's kind of like the email notification icon that Dana ignores on her phone because her email notification on her phone says that she has 5,000 unread emails, but it bothers me. I've got that little red number, and I gotta make it go away, right? And it's the same thing. It's showing that data, dashboarding it in such a way that it makes you want to change, and using the metrics in offsetting ways, because there's a habit of using metrics. It's like, you're deploying really, really fast. You're awesome. Well, yeah, but it's failing all the time. It's terrible quality, right? You have to have balanced sets of metrics that can't be gamed. Measure in 2s and 3s and 4s.
Everything can be gamed, so you want to set up in such a way that when you game it, you're producing the outcome that's desired.
Yeah, if you're responsible for maintaining and presenting metrics, how can you present them in a way that the behavior of gamifying things works in your favor? There's a pull request that Walmart submitted to Hygieia that puts a star rating on Hygieia dashboards, 1 to 5, based off of your adherence to CI/CD. And we made that public, so I can talk about it. And that continues to give dividends internally, where teams are like, hey, how do I get this to a 5? Well, deploy more than once a month and it'll be better. Right? But, it's using metrics to drive the behavior, not just to indicate.
To hack the undocumented API.
Yeah. There's Scott. What's Scott's last name? Okay. So there's a friend of mine who used to work for Columbia Sports. He now works for Nike. And I was talking to him, and he said that we should have studied psychology instead of software engineering, because what we're trying to do is hack the biggest undocumented API, right? It's how do we push the right levers to get the outcomes we want, and it's hard.
So I got a question from Bill D. I don't know if it's a question. We'll phrase it as a question: is how do you keep these metrics from being weaponized, and what do you do if they are weaponized?
Well, if
in your experience.
No. So if the metrics are being weaponized, there's a few things you can do, which is to measure the person who's weaponizing them.
I like Bob's answer.
What's Bob say?
Weaponize them for good. Done.
Yeah. So what if, for example, you created a dashboard to compare VP's deployment metrics, delivery metrics, to each other and to the state of DevOps report, right? What if you did something, hypothetically, what if you did something like that, right? So that the VPs were being measured, right? And then what also if you worked very hard to make it very difficult to weaponize those metrics. And if you saw somebody weaponizing those metrics, you took corrective action, hypothetically.
So, yeah, at the jelly bean wheeled forklift flying company.
Right.
That's when we talk about a company, we all have a fictitious company that makes flying forklifts with jelly bean wheels.
Yes. I work for Amazon. No, but I mean, so the weaponizing of metrics is key. And the first thing is educating people what those metrics mean, and also what happens if they use those metrics for evil, right? Because your goal is to improve the company, and if you use the metrics for evil, you destroy the ability to use those metrics to improve the company. And if I see someone weaponizing metrics, I will go and work with them and explain to them what the metrics are actually for. And if they continue doing it, I would probably take some other action that they wouldn't enjoy.
So James has a good question. While we're talking about metrics and your VPs, what are those? He says, is the metrics for VPs the number of times they deploy a new org chart? Well, I think that was sarcastic now. I read it again.
So, I think I spend a lot of time talking to a large portion of the Fortune 100. My colleagues in other companies who are working to do the same thing in large enterprises, and we all are going to point to deploy frequency, change fail rate, mean time to recover, and lead time, right? And also, how happy are your associates? How happy is your customer? And I think those are really good metrics to show how well things are going in your area.
Cool. There's got to be more questions. I know we someone named Deal something that said he'd go for another 30 minutes, which would be about 8 o'clock. Bill D is typing, which means questions are coming, and there's a lag. So real quick, I want to pitch April 15th at the Canton Public Library. No affiliation. Bob Allen, who is being a champion of Slack right now in Twitch, answering questions, will be presenting BDD. And it sounds like James will be experiencing GDD until that date.
Yeah, and I'll tell you again, I cannot stress enough the importance of BDD. So if there was a few things I would point everybody to when they're talking about CD: behavior-driven development, contract-driven development, domain-driven design. All right, those are cornerstones, right, of getting to where you need to go.
Say that again. BDD.
Behavior-driven development, contract-driven development, domain-driven development, domain-driven design. Right? Because a lot of enterprises, you're going to have applications that you just can't do CD with because they're giant monoliths. But DDD will help you design the decomposition process to break them up. So
it looks like a guy named Chris said, it's more of a statement, but I want to validate a statement, see if you agree with it or disagree with it.
Is it Chris G? I disagree.
Yeah, this guy named Chris G. I don't know if I've ever.
I disagree with everything he says. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's wrong here. He says if you're working in small batches, delivering frequently, this is an easier to answer. So I think he was responding to the VP question. So I'm sorry. Some of this is, you're reading it backwards and tracking it on Slack. You get some of the questions backwards. You're like, was that answered?
Slack is better.
More real time anyway.
Yeah.
So, okay, open-ended question here. You are now working at the the flying factory, the flying forklift factory with the
Flying
demo.
forklifts, yes.
Both of you have been hired. Congratulations.
Yep.
Gugu is your manager. He's a nice guy, right?
Yep.
This isn't evil manager. This is just well-dressed Gugu. The code is stored on a file share and emailed between the developers. And it's
Believe
deployed,
me, I've heard worse.
it's deployed by the DevOps team.
From the developers
I'll let
machine.
you regain your composure.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to have an aneurysm, but go ahead.
So what's the first thing that you guys do in constant?
So the very first thing I would do is I would say, I just got hired.
Yeah.
Okay. The first thing I would do is I'd say, hey, who's the highest person in the report structure who's on our side, who wants to make things better? Because I'd really like to go talk to them. We really need some help from the top, because we can do a lot of stuff at the grassroots, but all it'll be is a whole bunch of people in little pockets trying to do stuff. And we should do that. We should educate the developers and get them on board. But we need advocates from up top who understand. And if they don't understand but are just interested, we need to train them so that they do understand, so that they can help push. Because we need air cover, and we need people from the top saying this is the right thing to do, to bring everybody else into at least thinking about it.
Okay, what is going there?
The teams on their own can't do it.
What was that?
So let's to rephrase the question. So Google's not like empathetic and learning. Google is
waterfall.
Google is all about buying his boat, and if he delivers that software without changing,
Yeah. So I now report to him.
I live by the PMP standards.
He is PMP certified. No.
So you just hired me, and I know how to deliver, and I'm also PMP trained, and I know it's wrong, and you're telling me that you're not interested. You just want us to. Oh, that's an easy question. Okay. Since I've worked in this environment, I start submitting my resumes. I start submitting to other companies, and I change. Or it depends on what the policy is about moving between teams in the company. If there's a manager who's more aligned with sustainable delivery, I'll go try to work for them. But if that's not possible, I might try to convince you. But if you're not interested at all, I'll just leave.
So we're coming up to the midpoint of the hour. We have 6 more minutes. It looks like we're losing viewers, which is a good lean metric to, well, they still like us. Maybe wrap it up a little.
Sounds good.
Let's wrap it up. So I got to do my pitch, right? April 15th. Cross your finger. Everybody cross their fingers. April 15th, Canton Public Library, Behavioral Driven Development with Bob Allen. Right? You're going to get hit on Twitch and LinkedIn. That's all I need to say. Bryan, Dana, how do we get a hold of you if we have like these questions about flying forklifts?
I mean,
LinkedIn,
Slack.
Yeah, Slack. I'm
We're
on
in your
this
channel now.
I'm on
We've
this.
invaded.
Yeah, I'm on this channel now. But LinkedIn, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I love having conversations with people. I love testing what I think I know against people's problems. And I also love helping other people get there. There's a lot of people in the community that helped us get here, and we believe in paying it forward.
Yeah.
Good. And what's your next presentation? What's your next conference that we should tune into that doesn't have beach towels hanging from doors?
Well, if we get accepted.
We don't know yet.
Yeah, if we get accepted, we've got presentations submitted for DevOps Enterprise London and DevOps Enterprise Vegas. There's a talk we were invited to talk to.
Sonotype Leadership Forum, but I think that's a
private one.
closed group.
But they did tell us that they're holding a spot for us for All Day DevOps. So
if nothing else.
So apparently we need to submit a talk for All Day DevOps because they're waiting.
You can tell them that you opened Canton Coders, and that should open the door for any presentation you ever want.
Yeah, you know what? What I'll do is I'll text Gene, and I'll tell Gene, you need to make sure that our talk for DevOps London gets accepted. Because
especially since we opened it wearing our
because we have our
shirts.
Unicorn Project shirts on.
Yeah.
Right.
And the final question I have for you guys. if I actually want to do this, what do I need to read? What would be the first book you just pull off the shelf?
Honestly, it depends on where you're at,
Yeah.
right? Depends
No,
what level you're at.
I think there's someone named Hannah in our audience that just learned how to program within the last couple of years. What would you recommend for them to do?
Just learn how to program?
Yeah.
Ooh.
The
Are they
answer
good?
can be just keep trying.
Do they already know how to test?
No.
Learn how to test.
Okay.
But I would pick up, if you're a software developer, read Continuous Delivery by Jez Humble and Dave Farley. If you're
I don't have on my table here.
If you're a manager, read Accelerate by Nicole Forsgren, Gene Kim, and Jez Humble. Yes. I've handed out 7 cases of Accelerate in my company.
Everyone can benefit from Making Work Visible by Domenico De Grande.
Yes, Making Work Visible. Everybody can benefit from Making Work Visible by Domenico De Grandis.
And the final question I always want to ask people when I ask experts about things: are you ever good at it the first time?
No,
No.
How long does it take you to be good at it?
I'm waiting.
So being bad at things is the first step, right?
Learn something new every day.
Look, if you think you're good at it, then you're wrong. I mean, it's just straight up. If you think you're good at it, then you've stopped learning, you've stopped trying to improve, and you're wrong.
Yeah. One thing we didn't get to, Dana specifically, I did listen to one of your YouTube presentations, and I really liked your commentary around building a community.
Yes.
No. Yep.
How important that is and the steps that you take to do that. Hopefully next time we get to it, hint, hint, next time.
Maybe they should fly up here, but we have no
Let's talk about community.
on a door.
So I struggle with that a lot, just getting people active, people always engaged and building a community.
You're a manager with a budget. Fly her up here.
So we'll touch on that real quickly because it is key, Dana.
Well, no, I mean, it takes a lot of diligence. It takes passion. It takes, I mean, you watched the presentation, but for the benefit of other folks, you can't just tell someone to start up a community. It really has to be driven by someone with a lot of passion. If you see someone with a lot of passion, you need to give them permission if they don't feel like they have permission to start it and drive it. But, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of, I don't really want to call it failure, but it's definitely lean and building and having the patience. There were times it was just Bryan and I sitting in a room waiting for people to maybe show up to partake in the CI/CD community. And so, it's a lot of that. It's finding the marketing venue. How can you communicate out events? How can you communicate out that you want people to talk? And the underlying goal of the success of the community that I have built is that it's an open, honest space. I mean, I call it using the culture to teach the culture. Because when you have DevOps, calms, sharing is part of it, trust is part of it. There's a lot there in learning from failure, trust, and sharing. That if you just establish a group and start that group up with, come show what you tried so other people can learn from your failures. Come show what you're in the middle of. Maybe someone else is doing it and you can save time by collaborating. Show successes too. That's great because people can learn from that. But it's establishing a really good mission, establishing a consistent schedule, because if it's all over the place, people don't know when to look for it. There's like a whole bunch of keys, and I've actually come up with more since I think that presentation that you looked at. I just put together a document around it a few weeks ago, actually, for some people that were looking to start up communities. So, there's a lot to it. It's patience, and then find out, what are the buttons? What kind of free swag can you give out? give away free food for some of your meetings. Get people there. I guess it doesn't work now remote, but.
Dude, we have an $8 budget. That's how much the domain costs.
But it's been a key enabler. It really has. Is having the community out there and having people. It's helped my team to just say, "Hey, have you asked in the community before you come talk to us?" Somebody probably has done it, and if not, it'll at least spark a good conversation.
Having an open community where people can come and talk, and it's truly grassroots, and it's truly people have the freedom to say what they want and talk to each other. People from other areas, different teams, different management, different context can really learn from each other that maybe they are more empowered than they think they are, that they can help drive this and help push this where they didn't realize that before, and that helps really grow things.
I appreciate everything from Canton, Michigan, which is, where is that, Gugu? Which way is the map on this? This camera's backwards. Like, we brought a map of Michigan to show where we are. We're right here. Detroit's right here.
Your hand's not even on the screen.
It's not? Oh.
There you go.
We're right here. Canada's over here. We can't go there right now. They shut the door. But we appreciate it. If you're in the Canton area, April 15th, Bob Allen in the library, no affiliation. Dana, Bryan, thank you. We did record this, and we may post this then online if we think it's actually good content. But love to hear your feedback.
Wow, now it's going to pass the test.
Meet us in person if you know where we are. Thank you so much, everyone, for signing on.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks so much. It's been a lot of fun.